Over the weekend, there were three violent murders that transpired, and a lot of people will look at all three and see them as isolated incidents, but they all tie together. Just bear with me, and I will try to explain how all these events interconnect. Now, over the weekend, we had this singer who was on The Voice, and she was a YouTube sensation, and she was doing a meet and greet, and she was murdered by what seems to be some sort of stalker type guy. And here in the New York area, we had a man who went into a ShopRite and just picked a random guy and murdered him with a knife, just cut his throat. And then we had the massacre that happened in Orlando, where the Arab American man, went in there and murdered 50 people and injured 53 more. He shot up the nightclub. And a lot of people will look at those three events and see them as individual, isolated incidents. And they're not isolated. What they are a part of is a trend that I have talked about in a previous video before called Attack of the Killer Simps. And in that video, I talked about this trend of how all these acts of violence are due to the way we are raising males in American society. Because when you look at this increasing trend of mass shootings, mass murders, and assaults, it has to do with the way we are raising males in American society. A lot of these males, they are not growing up with the life skills or the social skills that are going to help them navigate this thing we call life. And because they do not know how to navigate life, they do not know how to deal with certain situations. So they do things like the guy who murdered the girl on The Voice. They fixate on a single individual, and when that object of their affection or the object that they're idolizing starts doing things that they don't like or disagree with, they become obsessed with them to the point where they're thinking about killing them. So that's one of the ways a lot of these guys don't know how to navigate their emotions and how to deal with their feelings. So they'll put this person on a pedestal. They'll idolize them, and they won't. The whole thing is that because they don't know how to deal with their feelings about that person, their feelings of affection turn into resentment and contempt, and they start thinking of ways of how to harm this person. And that's one of the ways these males don't know how to deal with their emotions. Another thing that they do is because they don't know how to deal with their emotions, they start becoming unbalanced, like the case of the individual who was at the ShopRite. A lot of people noticed that his behavior was becoming more and more unbalanced, and the guy was becoming more and more unhinged. And again, that has to do with the way these guys are raised. They don't know how to deal with their feelings. They don't know how to deal with their emotions. And because they don't know how to do that, they don't know how to have a good, strong sense of self control. So, what they do is, if they feel like doing something, they start acting on impulse. And this guy, for the way it looked like, he acted on his impulse. He decided, I'm just going to go kill a random guy. He goes, slits the guy's throat, and then when the police lock down the supermarket, he then tries to call himself blending in and acting like he wasn't there, not understanding that when you're in a supermarket full with people, there are video cameras being recording every move that you make in that supermarket. And people saw that on that video camera and pretty much pointed this guy out. And after that, he wound up getting arrested. And that also goes to the case of these males. And they live in their own world. They live with their own thoughts, and they have no sense of understanding about the world around them and the people around them. They think because they do something, no one is going to see them. They're not living in a world of logic and reason. They're living in a bubble. And that's what I saw the more and more I listened to that regarding those two cases and the case of the Orlando massacre. When I listened to the background information on the man from the Orlando massacre, he fit the profile of what I've been seeing, what I call these killer simps or psycho simps, or you can call them power simps. And his pattern pretty much fit the profile, just like these other males. Um, Again, even though he had a father in his life, he had issues with security regarding his masculine identity and his male identity. He kept getting upset and emotional over homosexuality, and it just consumed him. And instead of him, understanding that there are certain things you can't control regarding other people, and that you can only control yourself, he began getting emotional, taking it personal, and began fixating on it. And this fits right into the profile of these killer simps. What they do, they fixate on things because they believe in their minds if they can fix a situation, they can make it better. But instead, because these guys do not know how to navigate their emotions and they lack logic skills, reasoning skills, and problem solving skills, their solutions for the problem are all warped and twisted. So their idea of a solution, like this guy's idea of a solution when he saw the two men kissing, was to go out and kill all the gays and then declare loyalty to ISIL. That was his idea of a solution. And this is the way these killer simps think, just like the Elliot Rodger was thinking. He can't get any women, so he's going to go out and kill a whole bunch of women, but he actually goes out and kills a bunch of men. But that's the way they think. There's not that much logic. They're going on emotion, and their whole idea of solutions are zero sum things that make absolutely no sense to the rest of us. So whenever you see these type of males, they have a very, very hard time understanding how to deal with things. They're used to the world revolving around them. They're used to the world catering to them. They're used to people giving them whatever they want. They're not used to a world of people having different opinions, different viewpoints, different ideas, and different ways of doing things. Everything pretty much has to fit into their idea of what things are supposed to be. And this is the big problem in America that no one's paying attention to. They're looking at the violence that went on in the Orlando massacre. They're looking at the violence that happened to the girl who was murdered from the voice who was murdered. They're looking at the violence that the man who was murdered in the ShopRite transpired, but they're not looking at the bigger picture regarding what is causing all of this violence. And what is causing all of this violence is the way we are raising boys to become men. Because I said after I made the video a couple of months ago in earlier Attack of the Killer Simps that we were going to see more of this type of violence. And sadly, my words have come true because I look at the big picture and I said, it's the way we are raising these boys. These boys are being raised very dysfunctional. A lot of these boys are being raised, in many cases, with a too close attachment to their mothers, or they're not being raised to understand what boundaries are, what limitations are, how to understand that you are not the only person in the world. You are not the only person that the world revolves around. Your opinion is not the only opinion. Your view is not the only view. And it is not up to you to go out and try to fix things through violent means because you don't understand how the world works. And I look at that trend and no one is talking about it. Instead, they're dealing with symptoms of the problem and talking about things like gun control when the problem has always been that these males were never taught self-control. This is why they are acting out the way they are acting out, because no one has sat down and taught these males how to navigate their emotions and how, even though you are feeling something, you do not have a right to act, and you do not have a right to act to harm other people because you have feelings or an opinion and you see someone who has an opinion and feelings that you disagree with. This is something that a lot of males over the last 25, 30 years have not been taught. And this is why they are acting out the way they are. This is why they are violent the way they are. They expect the world to cater to them. They expect the world to do whatever they want. They expect the world to be what they want it to be. And they want everybody to sit down and agree with their view of the world. And when people don't agree with their view of the world and the world doesn't go the way they want it to go, they feel that because they have been wronged, they have a right to go out here and pick up a weapon and go out and harm people. That's what these males do, because that's the way they believe that you solve problems. And in many cases, they've seen their parents solve problems this way, where they may not pick up a gun or something, but they'll yell at somebody or they'll hit somebody, and that's how they see problems getting solved. They don't understand that you live in a world with over 7 billion people, and people have different opinions, people have different views, people have different lifestyles. And you, because you see something you don't like, doesn't mean that you have a right to go out and attack someone. Or if things aren't going your way, you have a right to attack someone. What I see with this type of behavior is that these people, these type of males, don't understand how to get their needs met. They don't understand how to solve problems. They don't understand how to use logic and reason. Because when I read about that, not read about the Orlando Massacre, when I was watching the TV and watching that Orlando Massacre, and I listened to this talk about this guy's anger about gays and how he got mad because his son saw two men kissing. I'm like, if this is what you saw and you did not like it, your solution was to move out of that area. Now, that Florida area is known for a lot of gay and lesbian people living in that area. Just like if you move to San Francisco, there's a lot of gays and lesbians there, and in New York, there are neighborhoods where there are a lot of gay and lesbian people. And if you don't like if you don't like homosexuals, your solution was to move. And if he was supposed to be a devout Muslim, his solution would be to move out of the United States if he did not like the policies and the procedures of the United States, to a Islamic state where he could live the rest of his days. But instead, because he was emotional and didn't have much control over his emotions, he thought his solution was to go buy a gun and get rid of the gays in the area. That's how irrational and illogical the way these males think. That's how a lot of these males of this new generation tend to think. And I saw, the seeds of this type of behavior when I was 12 years old in junior high school. I saw the same type of males thinking, and the way they think is just completely, when you see it, it's just completely insane. Everybody has to do things their way. Everyone has to agree with them. Their opinions are the only opinions. And if you think differently than they do, or you represent something differently than they do, their whole idea of solving the problem is to bully the person into submission or to destroy them. Those are the two ways these types of males operate. They don't want to accept that there are different views of life. They don't want to accept that there's different opinions. They don't want to accept that there are different ideas. And this is the trend that no one is paying attention to. Not your Barack Obama, not your politicians. None of them are taking a look at that bigger picture. Instead, they're talking about gun control. And they're saying we need more legislation to stop people from owning guns. Well, that's not going to solve the problem. As we see in the United Kingdom, they have no guns, and they're dealing with the same problem where these same type of males are going out, taking out knives, and stabbing people. Because, again, they have very little self-control, and when they see people who express themselves differently or live a different lifestyle than what they're used to, their whole idea of solving the problem is to try to destroy the people who represent ideas that they don't like. And that's what these males do. And this is the trend that I've been seeing with all this violence that's been going on. But no one is really paying attention to it. No one is really taking a look at the way we are raising males. Nobody's looking at the way we are preparing males to go out into the world, because a lot of people, they focus on the economic aspects, like making sure the kids have clothes, making sure that they have food, but they're not focusing on the emotional needs of these males. And because they don't focus on the emotional needs of these males go out here and they don't know how to deal with their feelings regarding things. So whenever they run into a situation that they are uncomfortable with, instead of them coming out and saying, look, I'm uncomfortable with this situation, or I disagree with the positions that these people have, and I'm just going to walk out of this situation, or I'm just going to deal with it, they simmer, they boil, and then eventually they wind up exploding and then participating in these types of mass shootings that we're seeing right now. And we've seen so many mass shootings over the last year that you just have to sit down and say to yourself, this has nothing to do with guns. This definitely has something to do with the way we are raising males in society. These males do not understand how to function in the world. These males do not know how to navigate the world. And because they are becoming more and more frustrated, they are participating in these acts of violence and killing people just because they don't know how to deal with this thing called life. And because they don't know how to deal with this thing called life, they're having adult meltdowns, adult temper tantrums, and sadly, people are losing their lives. And this is just, sadly, is going to even get worse because the longer we keep sticking our heads in the sand about the issue of men in American society and even worldwide society, because I'm starting to see this happen in the UK, and I definitely see it in many of those Islamic countries. The way these males have been coddled, spoiled, and ill prepared on how to navigate this thing called life is coming back to haunt us because these males are just not prepared to deal with things. These males are not prepared to deal with things like rejection, loss, failure, and they're not prepared to deal with basic life principles. They're not prepared to deal with people disagreeing with them. They're just not prepared for anything that allows them to have to deal with these everyday situations their grandfathers and their fathers dealt with. And because they're so coddled and spoiled, they're pretty much having meltdowns, losing it, losing self-control, and some of them are developing mental health issues because there is no one there to prepare them in a constructive manner. And I'm looking at these situations, and again, I look at that and I say, we have a trend here, and it has to do with the way we are raising males. And sadly, there's nobody looking at it from that perspective, nobody looking at it from that viewpoint, and nobody looking at how we're going to correct the course with males. Because if we don't raise males to have some sort of discipline or resolve, we are going to have more and more of these mass shootings and violence where many more innocent lives will be lost. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.